Ekadashi. Anyone else? Which Ekadashi is it? Bhani Ekadashi? Right? I think so.
Is it Bhima?
Before tomorrow is actually the appearance anniversary of Lord Varahadev, the incarnation of the Lord. As we know, the Lord comes in many different ages and in many different forms and in different places, just to do the same thing again. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata ityadi. And in Bhagavad Gita, he says in chapter 4, text number 9, Janma karma chame divyam evam yoveti tatvata chaktva deham punarjanma naiti mam edi sorjana. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not upon leaving the body take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. There's a long purport there. Srila Prabhupada says, the Lord's descent from his transcendental abode is already explained in the 6th verse. One who can understand the truth of the appearance of the personality of Godhead is already liberated from material bondage. Therefore, he returns to the kingdom of God immediately after quitting this present material body. Such liberation of the living entity from material bondage is not at all easy. The impersonalists and the yogis attain liberation only after much trouble and many, many births. Even then, the liberation they achieve, merging into the impersonal Brahmajyoti of the Lord, is only partial, and there is risk of returning to this material world. But the devotee, simply by understanding the transcendental nature of the body and activities of the Lord, attains the abode of the Lord after ending this body and does not run the risk of returning to this material world. In the Brahma Samhita, it is stated that the Lord has many, many forms and incarnations. Advaitam, Achyutam, Anadim, Ananta Rupam. Although there are many transcendental forms of the Lord, they are still one and the same Supreme Personality of Godhead. One has to understand this fact with conviction, although it is incomprehensible to mundane scholars and empiric philosophers. So in every age Krishna comes in some form or another. Since Srila Prabhupada has referred to text 6 of this chapter, we'll just revert back to that. Ajopi san avyayatma bhutanam ishwaropi san prakritim swam adhishtaya sambhavami atma mayaya. Although I am unborn and my transcendental body never deteriorates, and although I am the Lord of all living entities, I still appear in every millennium in my original transcendental form. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyuttanam adharmasya taratmanam shridami aham. Whenever and wherever there is a decline in religious practice, O descendant of Bharata, and a predominant rise of irreligion, at that time I descend myself. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya dushkritam dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge, to deliver the pious and to annihilate the miscreants, as well as to re-establish the principles of religion, I myself appear millennium after millennium. What millennium are we in right now? What's the age we're in? Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga is known for what? Virtue? Saintliness? Advancement? No. It's known for hypocrisy. It's known for quarrel. Anyone had any experience of that? I should tell you about the phone conversation I had with my credit card this afternoon. So it's Kali Yuga and we all know it. So where's Krishna? What's going on? He says here that I come in every millennium Whenever there's a decline in religion and a rise of irreligion, that we've noticed, I think. So what's going on? How are we going to take advantage of Krishna's association now? He says, I come in my unborn form, ajopi sannavyayatma, although I never deteriorate and I'm unborn. Prakritim svamathishtaya sambhavami. Atma maya, by my own energy I come. And he comes to do two things. What are the two things that we mentioned? Anybody was listening? Think paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya dushkritam. Very good. No verses. That means that he comes to deliver these sadhus and to destroy the dushkritis. Which side are we on? That we have to think very carefully. Because in fact we oscillate. And as long as we're conditioned by Maya, Mahamaya, then we oscillate. Even if we like Krishna, even if we're pious and we have some good samskars and education, we are still affected. Pungsam kritan doshan, by the different faults or the flaws of this age. Kalikritan doshan, the flaws affected by this yuga. And then they're listed. This is in the Bhagavatam, Ekadasha Skandha. Dravya deshatma sambhavan. There are three kinds of doshas, three kinds of flaws. Dravya dosha means those flaws which are affected by the ingredients that we're working with, the facilities that we have at our disposal. Then there is desha sambhavam. There's those flaws that are born out of the environment that we're situated in. We hear a lot of talk about the environment. That means both the social environment. Well, nowadays we have to consider every factor. We have the social environment, we have the spiritual environment, we have the financial environment, we have the political environment. All of them pretty much. Biological environment even seems like it's topsy-turvy these days. So everything's messed up. That's Kali Yuga. So that's Dravya Sambhava doshas and Desha Sambhava doshas. And what's the third category? Anybody know? Atma Sambhava doshas. Those that we're bringing with us. Baggage, we call it in popular parlance. Usually in the form of bad samskars from previous lives. So these are the different flaws that are so much affecting us at all times, especially in this Kali Yuga. Kaler doshinidhi. Kaler doshinidhi rajan asti hi eko mahatguna. But there's one good thing about this age, even though it's like an ocean of flaws of these three types. And that is that simply by Krishna Kirtan, we can become, well, two things happen. On the negative side, all the doshas are dissolved or evaporated. If it's an ocean, you have to evaporate it. So that's called mukta bandha. And then param vrajet means we can go to the supreme destination also. That is to say, we can actually begin to get some insight, or even better yet, some experience of our actual spiritual nature. This is all affected by the simple process of chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. How does it transpire? Back to the Bhagavatam 11th skandha to finish the quote. These different kinds of doshas that we're suffering from, Dravya Deshatma Sambhavan, Sarvan Hariti Chittastho Bhagavan Purushottama. Bhagavan is within our hearts. He's called Purushottama, the best of all persons. And when he sees that we're sincerely chanting his name, you have 10th canto, chapter 2. When he sees that we're sincerely chanting his name with the effort to please him, calling out to him, Srila Prabhupada said, in the same way that a child cries for its mother. When we do that, do we do that? We have to analyze. But if we do that, put it that way, then the Lord becomes very pleased. Himself, he removes all these doshas that we're suffering from, these three kinds of doshas that form an ocean 3 kinds and many, you found?
It's canto 2 or chapter?
No, chapter 2, 10th canto.
I gave to someone.
Achha.
I have 3 and 4.
Anyway, so the Lord within the heart becomes very pleased. In the first canto, 2nd chapter, a very famous verse is also there. Shringatam sukatha Krishna punya shravana kirtana kriti antasto hyabhadrani dudhunoti suhrit satam. When we're honest, suhrit satam. When we have no ill intention, that's called suhrit. There are different kinds of friends. You can have your bandhus, those are your relatives. You can have mitras, those are ordinary friends. And suhrit, what does suhrit means? What kind of friends? Suhrit.
Close to the heart.
He's thinking, not only he's sympathetic, sahridaya as we say in literature, but also he's your well-wisher. So this is compassionate, well-wisher in general. He's genuine. See? So satam, amongst those who are sat, those who are honest, first of all. Because in this age, it's described again in the first canto, Dharma has taken the form of a bull, and that bull is standing on only one leg. Right? What are the 4 legs of the bull of religion? Anybody remember? Truthfulness, compassion, cleanliness, and austerity. And 3 of those legs have been injured, and the bull is hobbling along somehow or other in this age on only one leg. That is the leg of honesty. So we can see, if we read Bhagavatam carefully, we can see in the 8th canto, for example, that who was it who was delivered simply on account of his dedication to the virtue of being honest and keeping his word. 8th canto. Bali Maharaj. Bali Maharaj made an offer to Vaman Devi even though his guru told him, don't do it, it's Vishnu, he's cheating you. He's helping the gods. Don't do it, he told him. But because Bali Maharaj had already said, yes, whatever you want, you can ask of me. My whole family is known as charitable. Right? He kept his word. And he rejected even what his guru told him to do because his guru was actually Daitya Guru, Shukracharya. He was preaching to him to protect your money, protect your assets, protect your family members, don't think about Vishnu or anybody else. This is what demoniac persons will advise us. Think of yourself first. That's a common one these days, isn't it? You kind of have to, isn't it? Everybody's out to get you. So, truth. The bull of religion is hobbling along on truth. So if we're at first truthful, satam, then the Lord acts as suhrit for us. If we're not truthful, then why should he waste his time? Even on Facebook, you don't have to accept a friend that doesn't look to be genuine, right? So why would Krishna be obliged to accept everybody's chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, even though their motives are of any sort? What kind of motives do we see? Well, look around, read the news, or look around in your office at your co-workers and see what they're up to. If you're not satisfied with that, you can check out Srimad Bhagavatam also. It's in your local library, I'm sure. And you can see, what did Diti pray for? 6th canto. We're reading in the mornings here in the temple. Anybody know?
To kill Indra.
She wanted a son who would kill Indra because Vishnu killed her other sons. Who were those sons? Hiranyaksha. Today we're remembering Lord Varahadev. He killed Hiranyaksha. Twin sons of Diti. Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. So she was very devotedly worshipping Lord Vishnu even. With this, I think it was the Pumsavana Vrat. Is it called? I don't remember. But Kashyapa, her husband, who was saintly, he had advised her to do this. So she had such an infected motive. But she was at least worshipping Vishnu. Akama sarva kamo va moksha kama udaradhiti vrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param. At least, regardless of what you want, you should worship Vishnu. If you want all the kamas in the world, then worship Vishnu. He will give them to you if he wants to, and if your karma allows that. If you want nothing, then you should also worship Vishnu. And if you want liberation, then you should also worship Vishnu. In either case, you should worship Vishnu.
Yeah.
Think about this. People, sometimes we like to worship demigods. Of course, nowadays it's dying out, so I don't discourage it. But the fact is that even if you are worshipping demigods according to yajnas in Karmakanda Vichar, then still the Yajneshwara is there who is giving the demigods permission to give you the results of your fruit of action activity. Who is that Yajneshwara? Yajno Vai Vishnu. And does anyone who knows Bhagavatam very well know who is specifically the form of Yajna, the incarnation known as Yajna? Who is it? Hamsa. Not Hamsa. Maybe Hamsa. I mean, they're all called Yajna in general, but specifically, how is Lord Varahadev glorified? Yajna. Yajnesha, Yajnapati, Yajnapurusha. These are all names specifically for Lord Varaha. So we've come full circle. But the idea is that whatever we want, we should worship Krishna, and if we are honest with ourselves and we are trying to chant his name simply to please him, then because he's the Antaryami, he's the inner witness within our hearts, he can understand what is motivating us and he will reciprocate. When he's pleased with the endeavor to chant Hare Krishna. Simple thing, anybody can do. If you have two ears and a tongue. Even if you have one ear and a tongue, it can still work. Simply chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Then the Lord becomes very interested. I had an experience many years ago in Kmart. Do we have Kmart in Southern California?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. This was in Texas. So I was looking for something in particular, I don't remember what, because the significance of whatever it was I sought was overshadowed by the experience that I'm about to relate. So because it was Kmart, I couldn't get very much help from the staff. So I decided to approach one of them, and I noticed what her name was on the name tag. And I called her by name. Instantly, I had her full attention, just because of the name. So this is the potency of, imagine, Harinam. For billions of years, we are incarnating in one form after another, in one species after another, in one body and one world and one universe after another, endlessly, vainly, hopelessly, but faithfully trying to chase after the dream of material existence, either through gross or subtle sense gratification. What does that mean? Gross or subtle sense gratification. We try to cram the elements that we find at our disposal into the 10 organic senses that we are experiencing life through. That's called gross sense gratification. Or subtle sense gratification, we try to toy with all the ideas and all the virtues and all these subtle things, the intangibles of life, that are nonetheless also important. So either we try to enjoy in that way, which is called bhoga, those two kinds of gross or subtle enjoyment, or instead of trying to exploit the Lord's energy, we try to evade the Lord's authority, or the authority of his representatives, more likely. And that's called mukti kama, the desire for liberation. We try to escape, and people generally do that through cultivation of jnana. We don't find very many of them these days, because we don't have jnana adhikar anyway. It's Kali Yuga, remember? Nobody has any brains. Manda sumanda mataya, manda bhagya hi upadrutaha. We are slow. Manda means actually lazy. And sumandamati, our intelligence is really stunted. We're spiritually retarded, we can say. And manda bhagya, our fortune is very dim. I'm going through Sarde Sati right now, so I can tell you all about it. Sooner or later, everybody has to suffer the bad results of their karma. So it's Manda Bhagya, especially in Kali Yuga, these things are prominent. And if these three weren't enough, what's the third one? That's back to the Atma Sambhava doshas. That's Upadruta. Upadruta, what does it mean? Drut? I don't know, in music they have this Drutlaya. Drutlaya Tintal. Means fast, or the mind is agitated, is really what it means. Upadruta. Mind is always agitated. It's kind of like your tongue. Tomorrow morning when you brush your teeth, because everyone here practices good hygiene, I'm sure. Just poke your tongue out and check it out in the mirror and see if you can bring it to a stop. Your tongue is constantly, such an agitated sense organ, this tongue. And the mind is even worse than that. The mind, you cannot stop, it's flitting around faster than sparrows. You can't do anything about it. Arjuna says to Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, I think I might as well try and control a tufan. It's impossible. So actually that's a fact. It is a fact. And especially in this day and age, because of these flaws that we were talking about, Manda Sumanda Mati, it's hardly expected that anybody has Jnana Adhikar. Nobody studies Vedanta except for a few armchair speculators up in Hollywood. But even if we did have the Adhikar for studying Sanskrit or reading Vedanta Sutra or Brahma Sutra commentaries, etc., the fact is that we don't know what to do with it. We don't know what to do with it. Because almost all the interpretations that you get of Vedanta nowadays, they're dealing with a very artificial dream called Kevaladvaita, in which one just, what do they say? Brahma Satya Jagan Mithya. This world is false and Brahma alone is real. At the same time that they say there's only Ekam Advitiyam, right? Ekameva Advitiyam. There's only one thing, no second thing. So how can there be Satya and Mithya if there's only one thing? And let's just, logically, let's extrapolate from this fundamental contradiction in philosophy. How are you going to remain spiritual and at the same time lead a normal life, remain active in the world? How are you going to do this? This is the problem that everybody who wants to be spiritual has. There's only one way to do this, and that is if you find a spiritual way to employ your senses. And there's only one path that does that. Think about it. Sometimes we tend to lump all the different paths that are found in Vedic literature or in Vedic tradition. We kind of lump them all into the same generic category that we call vaguely dharma, right? Think about it. Karma kanda, for example. If you're doing karma according to the karma kanda, that is to say mimamsa, it's called purva mimamsa. You're doing yajnas. You're not doing anything that is not enjoined in Shastra. So first of all, right off the bat, because it's Kali Yuga and we've already discussed the flaws, most of us don't even have adhikar for that. And we don't have interest, even if we did have adhikar. And the proof is that we're all doing what we're doing instead. So that's karma. And then there's jnana, better than that. Because if we really get the results of karma, after some time we begin to consider nasti akrita kritena. There's nothing here that is not the result of karma. So what's the point? Adding karma to karma means more karma. Subtracting karma from karma means you still have karma. So you're not even in spiritual life yet. That's the point. Even though it's religious, it's dharmic, it's coming in the Vedas, but it's mundane. It's not spiritual. And you remain within this trigunya existence, moving up and down like the spokes of a wheel, Kalidas says in his Meghaduta. Spokes of a wheel are always moving up and down. Where they stand in any split second, it's not entirely significant because, you know, in the scope of eternal time. So, E Brahmanda Brahmite Kono Bhaktivanji Guru Krishna Kripa Pai Bhaktilata Beach, Chaitanya Charitamrita says in Bengali. That after wandering from one universe to another, as we mentioned already, one who is actually wise gets becomes favorable and he receives the seed of bhakti from a bona fide guru. Generally, people who want to be spiritual, they try to cultivate gyan. And that's not discouraged. Even in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, for example, chapter 4 as well, Krishna encourages this. The fruit of good karma, the fruit of piety, is that you have the adhikar for jnana. We've already mentioned that we're not Vedanta scholars, we're not particularly learned. It's because we don't have the best samskars in the world either. We not really have a good background of karma even. But my point is different than this. My point is that even if you have the inclination to cultivate jnana, even if your karma allows you the adhikar to do so, how are you going to remain active in this world, which you have to do? Sharira yatrapi chatena prasiddhet akarmanaha. Krishna says in chapter 3. What does it mean? Anybody know? You can't even maintain your body without doing something. But as soon as you act, you know that there's going to be a reaction. So how are we going to purify our activities? Only through bhakti. Karma cannot do it. Jnana cannot do it. Yoga gets a little close at best. Because in yoga we meditate on the Supreme. He's called Vishnu, not candle flame, as some of our Advaitin friends will advise us to do. Dhyanavastita tad gatena manasa pashyanti yam yoginaha. Anybody heard this verse? Famous verse. Yasyantam navidu surasuragana devaya tasmai namaha. It's actually from Srimad Bhagavatam, that verse. Very famous dhyan shloka. So it says that person meditation is done by the yogis, but that person that they're meditating on is Vishnu. So yoga comes a little close. But really, we can't figure out how to employ all of our activities properly and in a spiritual way until we come to bhakti. Why? Sarvopadhi vinirmuktam tatparatvena nirmalam hrishikena hrishikesha sevanam. Bhakti rochate. Bhakti is called that process of taking your hrishika, your senses, and employing them in the service of that person who actually controls and owns them. We don't own our senses. We didn't choose them, did we? Indirectly we chose through our karmas. But we don't own them, and we cannot control them. Any honest person, back to this last remaining leg of religion, any honest person will admit this. So how am I going to act in this world in such a way that I can be spiritual and not entangle myself further, and maybe more importantly, not entangle others as well? Every interaction you have with people in this world, it's going to result in some reaction for them. Are you elevating people? Are you encouraging them in the wrong thing? Are you degrading them? And the same thing works on us. Whatever association we have, sangat sanjayate kama. That is where our desires are coming from. We mentioned already the dravya desha atma sambhava, doshas. So the atma sambhavas, they're coming even from inside. What to speak of from the external environment. So, devotional service therefore means to take these senses and use them in the service of the person who actually owns and controls them. Poktaram yajñatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram surhadam sarvabhutanam nadva mam shantim richati. Krishna says, somebody who understands three things, he gets peace. What are those three things? Bhoktaram yajñatapasam. I'm the enjoyer of your sacrifices, of your austerities. That's Varahadev again, yajna. And the second thing, Sarvaloka Maheshwaram. I'm the Lord of all the planets and of all the demigods, Krishna says. And finally, Suhridam Sarvabhutanam. We've already been discussing Suhrid, how Krishna is our well-wishing friend. If you know these things about Krishna, that radically changes your life. If you understand that Krishna is meant to enjoy all of my austerities, all of my sacrifices, then you consciously dedicate your activities unto him. Krishna says this explicitly in Bhagavad Gita. If we study these books very carefully, these things are all very clear. And if we understand that Krishna is the supreme controller, that nothing can go wrong, not a blade of grass moves without his sanction, as the Upanishad tells us. And finally, if we recognize that Krishna cares, he loves me, he's my real friend, not like all these other people who are out to get you. When you are in the money, your friends multiply. When you lose your money, or when you have some extreme tragedy, or when there's shame brought upon you, for example, your friends all scatter, they won't touch you. Isn't it? That's this world. Shankaracharya says, even a man fears from his own sons if he's too successful. And Indian history, for those of you who have studied, you know, there's not a single king who ascended to the throne without killing either his father or his siblings. Practically speaking, not one. At least within the recorded history of this Kali Yuga. Don't believe me? Go and check it out. So, what is that verse? He says, Yavat vitto parjana sakta tavan nija parivaro rakta. As long as you're able to make money, so long your family members are very much attached to you and you're very important, you're the center of the household. Paschad, and that's coming for all of us, later on, Jivati jarjara dehe, when you're living in this old decrepit body, even in your own home, he says, nobody's going to ask, how are you doing? They don't care. You are irrelevant. Vartam kopina pritsati gehe, in your own home. Or if you are not irrelevant because you have enough money, then they kill you. Or they kill each other trying to get the inheritance. This is life. We all experience this. It's going on all around us. So, those of us who would at least have enough concern to sit here tonight and to think about how am I going to make my actions spiritual? How can I not only keep my nose clean karmically, and not only get some realizations maybe, but really to think about who I am beyond all this karma and beyond all this realization. Who am I? What am I to do eternally? How am I to focus my actions? For that we need to come to bhakti. And that bhakti has also been defined for us. Sarvopadhi viniramuktam. We become freed from all false misconceptions, false identities that we cultivate via the false ego in this world. And we engage our senses in the service of Rishikesha. Tatpadatvena nirmalam. When we do that, we become as transcendental as the Lord is. All these abheda vakyas that you read in the Vedas and in the Upanishads and Puranas, ityadi, they're talking about this only, Kaivalya. Kaivalya means you're one in quality and in spirit. You're in harmony, you're sympathetic, sahrit, sahridaya, with the Lord. Not that you become absolutely the supreme entity. That's not possible. So, how do we begin this bhakti? Anybody know? Well, it begins really with hearing, which is what we're doing now. But once we hear, jihva. What is the verse? Anybody know? Ata Shri Krishna Namadi Nabhavet Grahyam Indrei. One cannot, he cannot demand that the Lord appears before him. And neither can he use his mundane resources, his mundane faculties, to try to comprehend or to perceive the Lord. It doesn't work. What does Krishna say? Naham prakasha sarvasya yogamaya samavrata. I'm covered by them. I don't, again, you don't have to accept everyone who wants to be a friend on Facebook, so why should Krishna have to reveal himself upon our domain? Krishna, front and center right now. I'm chanting your name. See, you're supposed to come. I've been chanting for 5 months now and nothing's happening. What's wrong with you? I want my money back. All that money I put in the hundi, I want it back. Even though it was only $1.25 at a time. So, this is called Kaitava Dharma. So therefore, suhrit satam. For the sat, for those who are satam, then he's the suhrit. And when we chant his holy name, how does it begin? The second half of this verse. Ata Shri Krishna namadi na bhavet grahyam indriye sevon mukhe hi jihwadao. That seva, this bhakti that we're talking about, where does it begin? Begins with the tongue. How so? When you go to a doctor, Ayurvedic doctor at least, he's going to give you a diet first thing foremost, right? At least my doctor, he said the diet is 50% of your cure. And he's also going to prescribe some medicines. So in this Krishna consciousness process, in this bhakti yoga process, the diet is Krishna prasadam, and the medicine is chanting Harinam, chanting Kirtan. Both of them are done with the tongue. Harer nama, Harer nama, Harer nama iva kevalam kalau nastyeva, nastyeva, nastyeva gatiranyatha. Brihanaradiya Purana says unequivocally, when you write something 3 times, that's meant to knock it into the dull brains of this yuga's population. All of us who are Sumandamati. Harer nama, Harer nama, Harer nama. It could have said, instead of Harer nama, it could have said Harasya nama. It could have said, so many other names are there. But all Harinam, not Shivanam, not Durgama Nam, etc. Kirtan means Krishna Kirtan. And then, furthermore, because there are 2 things in the Vedas, there are vidhis, or chodana, those are injunctions, and there's also nishedhas, or prohibitions. It's called anvaya vyatireki vyapti in logic. Positive and negative coverage. You're covering all your bases, both positive and negative. So positive program is that you always remember Krishna, and negative program is you never forget Krishna. So similarly, in this verse we have chant the holy name of Hari, the holy name of Hari, the holy name of Hari. And the negative side is nastyeva, nasti eva, nasti eva. Eva means indeed, certainly, no doubt, nishchaya. See? 3 times. So for emphasis, so that it's very clear to everyone what the purport here is. So this is a simple thing. We can simply chant Krishna's name, and if we do so honestly and try to do so without any offense, because due to our conditioning, due to our bad samskars or our bad association or both, we have a tendency to think things or to do things that are actually offensive. Just like a dog. Here in this neighborhood, you're never allowed to forget dogs for very long. There are dogs everywhere, and it seems like all day long the people of this neighborhood are walking their dogs, and you can't sit on the grass anywhere, you know why. But, I mean, in Texas, I don't know if they have it here, but in Texas they have what they call a, quote, scoop law, end quote. Do they have that here? Anyway, you see the people, they have the plastic bag in hand, ready. This is called dasya. Dasya rasa. If you don't want to serve God, G-O-D, Prabhupada says, then you have to serve dog. D-O-G. It's a perverted reflection, as it were. Right? The perverted reflection, the trees are actually above the water, but when you see them reflected on the water, they're upside down, and they're trembling. So this world is like that. All things in this world are an upside-down reflection of the real thing. So if you don't want to serve G-O-D, then you have to serve D-O-G. You have to obey the scoop law, and you have to run behind the mud, ready, just waiting for him like... Anyway. Now, how did I get on this point? Anyway, the idea is that by chanting the holy name of Krishna, then all the ugly things within our heart, when Krishna sees our sincerity, then they are cleared out. And dog, as Prabhupada once said, dog means offense personified. because they're gross. I mean, here people live with them. I saw a cartoon the other day on Facebook. It's pretty good. It shows a dog, there's like 4 frames in the cartoon. In one frame, the dog is sniffing at the rear end of another dog. In another frame, the dog is sniffing at a garbage can. And in the other frame, the dog is licking its privates. And then in the 4th frame, the dog hops on the couch with the master and he starts licking his face. So you can think about this. And Americans, because they don't have the samskars, they don't mind this sort of thing. Sometimes they keep the dog in the house, and if anybody has a dog, I'm sorry. I don't know, you might, but I'm just trying to be frank here. Anyway, Prabhupada said dog is offense personified because they have this nature. They can't really control their senses, but they do have good qualities also. And we can learn from that. They're very faithful, they're very humble. There's a dog who sits, somebody brings him to the temple every once in a while, and they chain him to the fence out there, and he sits there very humbly and patiently waiting for his master. And when you see him, he kind of looks at you like this. And, I mean, you can learn something from anyone. You can't learn everything from just anyone, but you can learn something from pretty much anyone if you're thoughtful and sincere. Anyway, so we're talking about offenseless chanting. We have this nature, we're a little bit like that, and we have to clean that up. So we have to give up some nasty habits, and we have to try to cultivate the proper consciousness. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given us a very easy process to do this. He says, Tranada pisanichena turorda sahishnana amanina mana dena kirtaniya sadahari. He says that if we are more humble than a blade of grass, the same grass that the dogs go on, the same grass that we step on, right? It only has contact pretty much with the soles of your feet. That's pretty low. More humble than that, he says. Trinada pisanichena. And the symptom of that kind of humility is what? Turor iva sahishnana. I was taking a walk across the street. They have these beautiful big old magnolia trees. And I counted that there must have been at least 30 branches that have been amputated from this tree. That's what it means to be a tree. You tolerate all the freezing cold weather, all the heat, all the abuses, people scratching their initials on such and such love so-and-so. Dogs lift their legs under the tree. Everything, every offense is coming. But the tree tolerates and says nothing. And it gives. It gives its fruit, it gives its shade, it even gives its wood after it's dead. See? So more, just like that, we should be sahishnu, tolerant. And amanina. Service. So a devotee won't necessarily do that. But at the same time, we do want to cultivate, as we said, amanina manadena. We want to be amani and manada. We give people respect according to their status, and we don't expect anything from them. But if somebody wants to exploit what we see as Krishna's property, we can't tolerate that. Would Hanuman do that? Did Hanuman do that? No. That's right. Arjuna was very fired up at Kurukshetra, and he was fighting with full gusto because of his conviction in this principle. These people are rascals, and they're trying to stifle Krishna's plan. But we have to be sure of what Krishna's plan is. It's not necessarily Krishna's plan to fill a jetliner with fuel and fly it into the World Trade Center, for example. That's tamasic bhakti, if you even want to call it bhakti at all. It may also be called politics or madness or whatever, but the principle is there that according to Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, we have to discriminate. And once we're convinced of what Krishna's desire is, then we have to stand for that. And that's the whole purpose of Bhagavad Gita. Okay? Yeah.
So we realize that we know that there is a goal which is kind of very high and far away, and we realize also, like, at least my position is quite far off from there, and we are kind of we are trying. Really, we want to reach there, but we are I'm facing failures almost every day when I sit for chanting. My mind is wandering here and there. Not only that, in many different parameters we are failing, but yes, I want to be there. So it requires a strong determination.
Yeah.
So how do we get that determination that we carry on, it's not just pulling on, but enthusiastically and with the whole heart
Yeah.
we accept. So how to get that?
That's an excellent question. There's a couple of points that you made that are very important also. One was that you mentioned that it seems like our goal is very far away. And that's only partially true. In some ways, we've already reached our goal because it's intrinsic. We can't really be separated from it. But I can't dilate on that because the second part of your question is more important. Tamal Krishna Goswami used to encourage devotees by pointing out that although spiritual life is by nature a process of growing up. And Srila Prabhu has also explained that children, by nature, they have the innate capacity to walk. But it doesn't mean that they don't have trouble learning. It's not easy, and they stumble and they fall. And similarly with us in spiritual life, because we're immature only, although it's innate and intrinsic within us, in fact it's inalienable, our spirituality, but we're so long out of practice and we're so conditioned by these other factors that we've mentioned already, the environment, the facilities, the socialization, etc., it becomes very difficult to practice spiritual life. So where does this determination come from? There's a couple of ways we could answer that. Number one, I would say that determination comes from just being sincere. Suhrit Satam, understanding with faith this principle that Krishna is the friend of those who are sincere, and he will help if we demonstrate our sincerity in our practical action. If you are sincere but never demonstrate your sincerity practically, then you're not sincere. You see? That's one thing. And then another thing is that Prabhupada said, enthusiasm in particular, which is another one of the qualifications, but also determination, it comes from very carefully following the regulative principles, particularly of sadhana bhakti. And even warmer than that, we can say that to the degree that we accept higher association, more advanced Vaishnava Sangha, Satsanga, to that degree, the determination and other virtues, Vaishnava qualities that those devotees have, they will become imparted to us as well. So I would say then, just to sum, that number one, just be sincere. Cultivate that sincerity. Number two, very carefully follow the process, tat karma pravartana. And maybe the most especially important thing is to take good association, sadhu sangha. Prabhupada one time said sadhu sangha is 90% of our advancement. Sadhu sangha, sarva shastra koi lava matra sadhu sangha, sarva siddhi hoy. Sarva siddhi. Any perfection you want, it comes through good association. Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you very much.
Any other?
In your previous example, I see Prabhupada exhibited humility and tolerance even then when he dealt with those people, because humility comes from honesty, and he was honestly saying that you're not giving it to me, you're giving it to Krishna and nobody. So he was humble. And even though they were trying to cheat him, he was tolerant.
Yeah.
Right? So is it also, he did apply those principles.
Yeah. Yeah. And they did know that something was funny.
Yeah.
They knew, but they weren't sure what it was until the contract came.
Yeah, if I were to be somebody, I don't have humility and I don't tolerate, I would have got some gundas and tried to fight with them. Or I would have said, I know this politician, I'm going to...
That's the Indian-ish style. So, actually, if you think about the more explicit example of this is the way that Prabhupada reacted in Mumbai, in Juhu, when Mr. Nair was trying to cheat the devotees. Prabhupada was so heavy with him. He was so adamant and so uncompromising, and he was prepared to fight to the death because he knew that Krishna wants this land. Actually, a lot of people don't realize that when Prabhupada saw the Juhu land It was like 30 years before he came to America, when he was a grahastha working in Mumbai. He saw that land, and at that point he had this, somehow or other, he had this idea that Krishna wants this property. And he never forgot it. And he never gave up. When I was in graduate school, they gave me a little cartoon. It shows a frog who's being eaten by the stork. Have you seen that one? And the frog has got his head buried in the stork's mouth. All you can see is his legs hanging out the front, and his arms are hanging out the side. But with those arms, he's throttling the throat of that stork. So the idea is to never give up. And that was Prabhupada's example as well in Mumbai. He really fought. And after Krishna eventually interceded and killed that person who was trying to cheat the ISKCON devotees, I don't know what happened. I think he just dropped dead of a heart attack on the street or something. And Prabhupada was very happy. Prabhupada said you should organize a feast. Modeta sadhurapi vrishchaka sarapa hatya, Bhagavatam says. Even a sadhu becomes enlivened when a snake or a scorpion is killed. So, good point. Anything else? Yes, Rich?
You were talking about how association is 90% of advancement. Like for a person like me who's working every day, predominantly most time of the day, my day goes with, I would say, bad association, because you've been constantly trained to be impatient. You know, you cannot, if I have to fix a problem, I cannot be patient, to approach the problem. I'll have to get it done as soon as possible. It has to be in a hurry. And all the qualities that you're talking about is, you've been trained to not have that. My attention span is very short, and I've seen like one of the primary reasons for that is my job. I probably wouldn't just blame that, but I see that I've been trained to have short attention spans because of my job. But when it comes to bhakti, you need a lot of patience, especially when chanting and dealing with Krishna.
Focus.
So I was just hoping at some point in time, because I chant and get as much as association as possible, I was hoping that, even a little bit of association with saintly people kind of is equivalent to most of my time associating with non-devotees.
Well, it is actually. Shuddhyanti tasmai prabhavishnave namah. The process of bhakti is itself so powerful. It's really, really powerful, and we often underestimate that. But you can see the results. Those persons who, to the extent that they embrace the process and the association, they become very quickly purified. And if they're sincere, which is back to this essential honesty and the attitude that we approach Krishna consciousness with, and they apply themselves diligently, they very quickly become purified, even if they're coming from very sinful backgrounds. And Prabhupada often used to point out the example of his own disciples, who in those days were primarily from America and Europe and other places. Not the greatest samskars, but because they had so much faith, and because they were sincere, they became very elevated just within a few years. Think about 8,400,000 different species that we have been through, and how many years in each one of them. We don't know how long a redwood tree lives, for example. After coming from that, it's expected that you're going to have some psychological residue that impels you to commit some sinful activity or to be inclined towards sense gratification. That's called samskar. But this process is so powerful that even a person with bad samskars like that, he can become elevated very quickly, within the scope even of months, what to speak of years. But again, it's like if we get close to the fire, then we get warm. And if we keep our distance, then we remain tepid. So, tivra bhakti is the adjective used. Tivra means intense. We have to be intense, and that's the demonstration of our sincerity. If we're prepared to practice intensely and to take the association intensely. Guru mukha chitete koriya aikko. It says, when we make our spiritual master's instructions one with our own spontaneous cherished goals, that's that's when we make advancement. Arna kori homani asha, like a horse with blinders. Is that helpful?
Sure.
I mean, we can always, regarding how to get association, there's 3 things that Tamal Krishna Goswami taught me. We can take better advantage of the association that we already have. That's one thing. Really drill and find the vein of gold that you're looking for. In any other devotee's heart, it is there. Otherwise, how is he here? You can find that. There's always something to appreciate about any devotee. So that's one thing. And then another thing is that we can seek the association that we want if we can't find it locally. And in today's technologically linked world, it's very easy to do that also. People listen to classes in Mayapur, in Vrindavan, all the time. We're all linked together now, so it's not hard. And then the third option is maybe not so easy for ordinary people, but this is the option that Prabhupada exercised. He wasn't satisfied with the association in Gaudiya Math, so he went out and created a whole new society of devotees. And he associated with his disciples, and sometimes he even took his disciples' advice. So it's a question of determination and sincerity and really how much we want it. That's all. Laulium.
So I think he was referring to the workplace.
Yeah, well, it's true that generally in today's competitive workplace, the kinds of qualities that are conducive to bhakti are not conducive to work. You have to really work hard to be a demon if you're not one, and once you become one, then you have to work hard and undo all that work. And when you try to become a devotee, it's a problem. It's a real problem. Therefore, the real thing is this: that since any kind of activity, according to the logic of this evening's talk, any kind of activity, for the most part, as long as it's not completely sinful, it can be engaged in Krishna service. We have to be very closely guided by our spiritual masters about how to do that. And that way, even when you are at work, if you are really connected and dovetailing the fruits of your labor towards Krishna's seva, then you will not necessarily see that dichotomy between your mundane responsibilities and your spiritual responsibilities, because they become one and the same. When we actually surrender what we're doing, or what we're earning from what we're doing, for example, to the service of Krishna, then it becomes not a flaw, but it becomes an ornament to our devotional character, that we want to be aggressive, and we want to be fruitful and productive, and we're prepared to do whatever is necessary to do that. Arjuna had to do this. He had to kill his own family members because he understood this principle. In the beginning, he didn't want to do that because he was seeing a distinction. So, bhayam dvitiyabhinaveshitasya. As long as we see something non-Krishna here, and to the extent that we see something non-Krishna, then we're going to have this problem. And it's a huge problem amongst the grahastas in the modern world. It's a huge problem. But when we become tight and situated very firmly at the lotus feet of the spiritual master, and we are receiving practical directions from him as well, then we see how to link what we're doing with Krishna consciousness, and that problem simply disappears, simply vanishes. Parisamapyati, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, it merges entirely into transcendence. Jnane parisamapyati. Is that okay?
So, thank you.
Sounds like the tree and the reflection, as long as we know the flickering reflection that is going to be there, we are focused on the actual tree, then we don't have to worry about the flickering reflections.
There's always a way to dovetail our situation in Krishna consciousness. Many, many years ago, devotees used to go out and sell paintings sometimes. And I was working in a mall doing this, shopping mall. So in the mall they had this piped music, Muzak they call it. And, it was, I think, maybe Diana Ross and Supremes or something like that. Some old song that's, about, what happened to the love that we had, and this kind of... looking at this from a mundane perspective, it would be very disturbing to the mind of someone who's trying to focus on Krishna. But if you take the position that you cannot really change your environment, but you can, well, it's like a cliche, if life gives you lemons, make lemonade. So just juggle the ashraya and the vishaya. This is rasa theory. And just think that these words are not coming from Diana Ross, they're coming from Krishna. That changes everything, doesn't it? So that's what I did. I had to. Otherwise it would have driven me nuts. So this is a necessary stage in our devotional development that we all have to undergo. We have to learn these lessons one way or another. And for everybody it's different. That's why you were asking about what are the practical manifestations of this humility. Well, it's different for everybody. I can't say. How this thing transpires, we don't really know, we can't predict, but it does happen. And in principle, we know how it works. Is that okay? Or? Yeah.
Regarding association, like you said, it's the most powerful thing, and 90% of our progress we made by association. So as long as like one is senior devotee, it's very easy in one sense, if you are just attentive, because it's mostly by hearing that we associate with them. The problem becomes when one is like kind of peer, either we become too casual, so how to make the best, but they are also very powerful because they can correct us, and there's so many things we can achieve through peers. And that's the most of the association we have is with peers. So what's the best way to associate so that we can derive the maximum benefit?
Think in terms of rasa theory. Your question is predicated on the assumption that one rasa is more important than another rasa. There are things about Sakya rasa that are as valuable as whatever we can get from Dasya rasa or from Madhurya rasa or Vatsalya rasa. Our peer association is very valuable for our spiritual advancement if we know how to take advantage of it. It's not that we can expect the adhikar of our gurus in our peers. We can't really expect that because they have a different relationship. But there are things that we can appreciate about our peers that can help us to advance spiritually. I mean, we can reveal our minds very freely. We can get strength in practical ways. I mean, these are the things we have to look at. We don't necessarily need to expect that the same kind of inspiration that we take from seeking more advanced association is necessarily going to come through those avenues in our peers. But there are things about our peers that can help us nonetheless. Is that okay?
Wouldn't you say that just as Krishna loves us unconditionally, we can also love and accept others, all these differences?
Yeah. If we are Krishna conscious,
yes,
that's the idea.
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole idea. I mean, we are practicing unconditional love, and it's not. I mean, Krishna is not the only important one. This is the criticism that sometimes devotees have with Mirabai, the Rajasthani princess. With her, it was all about her and Krishna, and not really anyone else. But with the devotee, when the devotee advances within the realm of devotional kaivalya that I mentioned earlier, when his oneness is one of sympathy and harmony with Krishna's desires, and when his oneness is a concern that Krishna's mission be fulfilled, then the importance of all the living entities becomes as important as the relevance of Krishna within his life. I mean, there's no point in having Krishna without Radha. We're not interested in Krishna without Radha. And Radha is simply expanding her devotion in the form of so many other devotees. So all the devotees are equally important. And really, it's not just about devotees meeting a member of ISKCON or an initiate. The devotees is all living beings. Every soul is part and parcel of Krishna and is essentially meant to function as a servant of the Lord and giving pleasure to the Lord. So we interact with them in different ways. As Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, Shakale Shaman Korite Shakti Dehonata Jatajata. I want to, by your divine grace, I want to be able to respect all living beings, but each according to his adhikar. Sve sve adhikare ya nishtha saguna parikirtaka. It's kind of the same thing as your question, that everybody has a useful function, but they're not all the same. They're all different. Anything else? Children? Questions? No. Okay.
Thank you.
Very much. All glory to Srila Prabhupada.
Mukunda Prabhu ki
Jai.